Pessoal, hoje aqui tá com o JP, um grande diretor de arte da indústria de jogos e filmes. A gente vai estar conversando um pouquinho sobre os in and outs da indústria. E agora, primeiramente, I'll let JP introduce himself, so you guys know what I'm talking about. So it's not just me doing a monologue for introduction. Please, JP, take over and tell us a little bit of yourself. Nothing too deep, doesn't need to be that, because I think the questions we have here are gonna probably do that job, so yeah.
Sure. Well, hey guys, nice to meet all of you virtually. So I'm an art director, creative director, and now I am a founder of my own studio. So we'll give you a little background on how I got in games because I think that's always important for
Yeah.
you guys to know that. So for me, I was actually in school for animation. I was going to Loyola Marymount in Los Angeles, and my goal was to be on Cartoon Network or working with all the Looney Tunes, or even I did a little bit of internships with Film Roman, like Simpsons and all of that as well. So that was my dream. But I did that. I graduated, and that was the time that the animation industry imploded. So Cartoon Network went down. They were outsourcing all of the work, and
Mhm.
so at that point, I was competing with jobs for my teachers who were directors on Simpsons, and they were the lead special effects artists for Osmosis Jones. So as you can see, I probably wasn't going to get hired right away.
Yeah.
So at that point, I had to take a hiatus, and I started working on my skills and explored other things. And at this point, I had a brother that was in video games, and he was working at EA, or at the time it was called DreamWorks Interactive, and they made Medal of Honor. And so that was the original kind of the first World War II games that got the whole thing started. So he had me come in and help out, just model some weapons for him, and I was just learning on the fly. I had no
Yeah.
idea, but I was like, "Cool, I'll do it." It was fun, so I helped him out. Then they did Medal of Honor front, or they did Frontline, where EA bought them out, and so DreamWorks became EA. And then that was, if you guys know the history, that was the game that caused the EA lawsuits with the EA spouse lawsuits. You can look it up. That's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah.
But I helped out a little bit on that, and then that's when they created Spark, and Infinity Ward was created at the same time because they teamed up and they created Call of Duty. So my first game was on Call of Duty, the original, the OG, and that's where I cut my teeth, and that's where I learned how to make art and make entire levels and then throw them out because there wasn't time to make them.
Yeah.
So that's one thing you'll see with an artist that you learn as we talk through. A lot of it is you can't get too connected to your work because it could be a day later and the 2 months of work is just gone.
Yeah.
But from there, yeah, I was at Spark Unlimited for a bit. We worked on Lost Planet, Highlander, a bunch of other really cool titles. And then I made my way to Austin, and that's where I worked on Halo. So I did a bunch of work on Halo, and then Call of Duty, the Modern Warfare remaster, which is really awesome. A bunch of other games can't talk about because they weren't released yet. And then now we have started our own company, which is awesome, with some like-minded, friends and colleagues. And now we're cranking out our own shooter right now. So it's been really awesome. And then the great thing is I was able to meet Augusto in the middle of all this. So,
Yeah.
I was actually contracting to Augusto at, certain affinity where we were doing a lot of the work. And then we started doing work after that.
And we did work on Arctic 7 a little bit, but I don't think I didn't work under you. I think we were in a different section, right? Doing
A
like
different section, yeah.
environments and stuff. So
Yeah, I
that's,
was doing environment for direction, and then you were focused on
yeah, characters, that's true. Under Carlos Huante. Guys, probably,
Carlos,
I'll try
yeah,
to get
awesome.
Carlitos, but I don't know. He's kind of a busy guy. But yeah. So
Yeah.
JP, one of the questions that many of the youngsters, they have those questions is, what does an art director actually do né, on the day-to-day basis? So, like it's easy to say like I just do art direction, but what does that imply? What does it mean? So,
Yeah.
from your point of
Well,
view.
the first thing I do is I make Augusto get my coffee, and I like it. I don't like it too hot, just enough. And
Just
if
some
it's not, I
cream
throw
on
it
it.
at him. Some cream. No, you'd be surprised. I think there's different types of art directors, right? And depending on where you are and what studio you're at, will definitely change that position. But I
Hmm.
think the best art directors, they're not necessarily full-time concept artists. And I think
Yeah.
that's something that people need to understand is that when you're directing, that's the reason why you're called directors, because you're not going to have the time to do
To draw and
individual
stuff.
contributing at
Yeah.
the same level as if you're wanting to draw all day. Like there's going to be some prolific guys like Sparf and all those that can do that. But at the same time, when you're looking at making a game, you are directing everything from the player experience from the UI to characters to environment. You got to tell stories on how the script is done. So you don't have time to sit down and basically dig into everything. So your day really is managing for most of it. So it's setting up your team for success. So, I'd show up, I'd play the game if we're at the point with the game, look at the game, do the dailies, meet with each of the groups of the art department, and then meeting with the team for the actual game designers as well, making sure that everything is complementary and you're working with the game design. Because at the end of the day, you guys all know, if you could have the most beautiful game in the world, but if it's not fun, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
There's been plenty of games that have done that. So our job is to take this product and make sure that we're hitting this beautiful vision that ties with the gameplay, because that's where the best products are made, and people just love it at that point. So there's a lot of just organizing and then getting your team set up for success. And then my goal is to get all that work done in the first maybe 6 hours of the day. And then that gives me time to do any kind of like painting, feedback, get into the level and try to get, people like actual either, feedback notes or even just showing them how to do it. But at the end of the day, it's like you're coaching and you're not necessarily participating most of the time.
And that's one of the things I always tell my students, and most people in the industry who are concept artists, they don't quite get that part, that to be an art director, you actually need to be kind of like a generalist, because you need to understand like some aspects of like 3D modeling, some aspects of UI design and like gameplay, as you said, and even like trying to match the concept art to a 3D model. That's something that the art director is really there to make it work. And even then, you have to worry about the model working into the environment, because sometimes all those things are made separate. So when you try to merge them, they have the how can I say it in English, this dissonance, like
the Scooby-Doo effect. You have times where they just don't fit into the environment because the style is different, right?
Exactly.
Or the other big one is that you have this awesome character model that you made, and you have all this detail in, but you know what? It's a shooter, and you see him from about 30 yards away consistently. So you never see any of that detail. So you basically just wasted 2 months of work on something that no one's ever going to see except for a piece of concept art, right? So I think there's a lot of bits that, to your point, Augusto, is that you need to make sure that you're spending your time and money on the stuff that the player sees, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's something that not everyone gets, like, because you can get bogged down and noodling on these little details, and they're important at times, especially if you have cinematics. But for the most part, it's getting the work into the game, viewing it from the perspective of the player, and then putting your focus and your time on the items that matter.
Ah, man, I wanna your point of view on this, because on my course, Pantheon, okay, I actually teach my students to learn 3D. So most of the course is in 2D, like photo bashing, line art, silhouettes, a lot of silhouette studies, and then we go to 3D. And I think most people, they don't want to learn 3D. They think it's a waste of time. They don't want to be like a 3D guy, but you don't have to. You just have to have enough 3D skill to where, as a concept artist, you become more of an asset. So let me give you an example. So we were doing El Dorado, I think, or something like that. And I actually was doing all the concept art in 2D. And then I 3D modeled them really roughly. But that was enough to put them into the engine so they can actually match the proportions and see if it works, right? And you don't have to have a 3D guy to do that if you know 3D. So you become much more important in the pipeline if you are a guy who also knows 3D and 2D at the same time, right? So yeah.
100%.
Yeah. So I don't know, people create this idea, you need to be like a purist or something,
No, and at the end of the day, you are an artist. And, Carlos will say this too, like Carlos sculpts, he does drawing, he does everything, because what you're worried about is the volume of the character, right? And unless we're doing like a, WPA style old animation where it's like flat drawing, then, that drawing is never going to be the same once it's put into the game.
Yes.
And so some of the best concept artists I know, Augusto, you're one of them, is that you block out that 3D mesh, you put it in the context of the game, and then you flip around. It's like, if it's a gun, and you need to see it, and you design this awesome side of it, and you put it down, the barrel, you look at it, it looks terrible. And you're like, oh my goodness, this looks horrible. So you really have to be worrying about the model in the context of how you're going to see it in the game. So modeling, it's great. And I think, so concept artists, just know this, you guys will get environment credits too, because, and the way that Unreal is now, you can do the worst concept model in the world, jam stuff together, rub poop all over it, do whatever, throw it into the game, and guess what? It runs because it's all nanite now. So that's something that we do. The guys that are really good with just concept, we can take their concept right away, that's 3D, put it into the game and validate if it's good or not before you spend time making the mesh.
Okay, so I think with this question, we actually go to a really important one. So I have some notes here, guys, so I don't get lost. What do you look for when reviewing artist portfolios? So let's say you want to hire someone, right? And you have a specific need to have like a concept guy. What are you looking for, aside from the obvious stuff, like the creativity or the quality of the art, but what's like the thing that catches your eye the most? Because this is like a huge point for my students. They always want to know like, what they're looking for. I'm like, just, let's hear from the mouth of the gods,
Yeah, so we've done a lot of hiring, right? And I think there's different answers depending on the project you're on. So to just get down to the point of it is that when I'm looking at a portfolio and I'm working on a certain type of project, I need to see that they're competent in that style.
Yeah.
Right. So if I'm working on a Call of Duty game, I need to know that someone can hit realism, their scale is good, that they can pump out that quality of work. Like if it's someone who's done Diablo work and all of the work in his portfolio is more stylized, that's going to be a harder leap for me to put him on a game that's going to be extremely realistic. Right. So that's one thing to think about. So when you're applying to a game studio, you need to be able to do the work they're doing. So I always tell people like recreate a scene, right? If you're trying to get an environment job, like, and you're applying at Bungie, you better be able to make a scene of one of the games that they've worked on, right?
Yeah.
And there's nothing better to do that. Like that's, I still do it. Like I'm still making stuff from other like scenes from movies, trying to hit these different styles. So that way you know how to get there to that final answer, right? Now, if you're working on a brand new IP, it still does kind of apply that way because that art director, that creative director has a vision, right? They may be using Midjourney. They may have an art director that's already made some kind of like samples, but they're going to look for people that can plug into that style.
So okay.
That's one thing.
Okay, that's perfect because I never actually applied to any studios, and most of the concept art guys that I know never did that as well. Like nobody actually applies.
Yeah.
So the big question is, you're doing a new IP. How can you apply for a new IP if it's like NDA, right? Non-disclosure agreements, and nobody knows about it, right? So you can't, but that's the point. Yeah. So you need to be visible. You need to be posting on ArtStation. You need to have a social media, like even Instagram is really good for it. And I always tell my students, post on Instagram every other day. At least have like 2 projects on ArtStation every month. And try to get the trending, because you need to be seen, right? And if you're doing cool stuff, new styles, it's probably easier to fit into a new IP than to, just, okay, I just want to be like a Bungie guy, which is not a problem, but if you don't like Bungie or if you don't like anything that is like, in the known world now, you still have to believe in your like creative vision, right? And I think it's weird because even when Carlos hired me to do like some of the gigs, that's exactly it. He's like, oh, you match the stuff that I want to do. I'm like, but I just do like, my portfolio is just like cyberpunk dudes and there's nothing to do with this. But he's like, but you understand like proportions and really interesting ideas. So even then, it is a little bit like a closed industry, but at the same time, there's a lot of openings for new guys coming, especially if you have a very unique vision. Which is, the most important thing ever for concept art. And I think since you have a lot of experience with seeing a bunch of portfolios, what is like the biggest mistake you see in junior artists, like let's say in portfolio presentation or just like behavior,
Yeah. So there in a portfolio is when you put too much.
Okay.
At the end of the day, you do not need to put every drawing you've done in college or every drawing, like pick your best work. And more importantly, make sure that you have pieces that are representative of realistic, maybe stylized. Again, you have to figure out where you fit, but you need to have some polished pieces that, are there. Because I think one of the things that we see is that people throw everything they do into the portfolio. So even though they have 10 solid pieces, I see all these other pieces and then I start questioning. What you question is their taste. It's like, well, why would you put this in and that in? And then taste is not is something you can teach, but people inherently have it. And when someone has taste, you want them on the team because you can coach them because they have a good eye of discipline and basically, picking the best images of their own, right? So that'd be one thing is basically making sure that you're only getting the stuff in that's good. Ask your friends and don't get hurt about it because everyone's going to have an opinion. Ask if you have someone that's in the business already, ask them what their favorites are. And then really cull that down to make sure that it's presented well too. So the other thing is don't get some half-baked website that has bad colors on the side with like vomit of colors everywhere. Like present it like you would an art portfolio. I know this is kind of common sense, but
isn't.
If you present things nicely and it's not overly cluttered, it doesn't just make the image speak for itself, right?
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many websites I'll skip. If I go in there, it's got something animating, it's got their logo and all this crap that they just downloaded from it's like, we can see through that. Just show me the art, right?
Yeah.
And so I think at that stage, if the website's clumsy, then I'm gone, right? So.
And speaking to that, like, let's say you're a junior artist, you probably don't have like studio work there. You don't have like client work there. And sometimes, even if you do have it, you cannot post it because it's NDA, right? So,
correct.
And let's say they do have it. Like a guy like me, I have a bunch of like studio work, but I never post on my ArtStation. It's just personal pieces. Do you like to see mostly personal work or client work or a mix of both if you can have it?
I mean, you want to see both, but ultimately, like with you, Augusto, the way we found you is I just saw your ArtStation and you had the style of the stuff I like.
Yeah, that's it.
Right. So we were doing a game. So again, that goes back to the point is you had the competency in the thing that I was trying to make.
Yeah.
Right. So to your point, getting you guys active and making sure that you're getting workout is important. Right.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to stuff you've worked on, art directors will understand you can't show it. But if you just have it like, hey, I worked on this game, I've worked on this movie, if you want to see that work, I can ask them and see if I can show them under secure ways. I mean, there's ways to do that. So, but ultimately it's like, if you have your own portfolio and that speaks for itself, then that's not a big issue.
And as an art director and as a guy who owns his own company, like teamwork, all that stuff, I know the ability to take feedback is something that is major. I have a bunch of students. Some of them are really good. They can take feedback really well. They understand it, that I'm saying, like, not from a place of hate. I'm just trying to, hey, you can actually make this better. But sometimes they get butthurt. And I tell them, dude, you cannot get butthurt. Because if you do work in the industry, most of the stuff you do is never going to see the light of day. Never. Ever, ever, ever. And the worst of all, you cannot even post it. Because it's like NDA stuff for the rest of your life, right?
Yeah.
So what is the most important aspects aside from art? Let's say the artist is great, like skill-wise. What you're looking for someone in your company to work with today, like the feedback or the teamwork stuff. What's up with that?
Yeah. So number one, no one wants an artist with an attitude.
Yeah.
I don't care how good you are. Like you might be hired in for like, hey, you might design this one specific thing if you're that good. But at the end of the day, if it's not a pleasure to work with you and you don't take feedback, then I'm never going to call it.
It's a red flag already.
Yeah, it's a red flag. And I think the feedback thing, again, there's probably art directors that aren't great at giving feedback too, so I can understand people get upset. But ultimately, it's our goal to work together with you to give you the feedback. Well, we're trying to make it better, right? Yeah. So for me, I get excited. I'll see Augusto stuff. I'm like, hey, what if we do this? Or what if we do that? What do you think about this? And then on top of it, I ask him for feedback on stuff I'm working on because iron sharpens iron, right? It goes back to the Bible. Like you want to be around people who are going to raise you up. Yeah. You want to be around people that are better than you, that are getting you better. So if you have your mentality that your cup's full and you don't want to hear it from anyone, then you're not going to grow as an artist. Like every day, the more I learn, the more I realize how terrible I am in art. Yeah. Because there's so many talented artists and it's like, man, how do you do that? Like, I want to learn how to do that. So to that point, Augusto, it's like, you need to be hungry to learn. You need to be like, if there's someone better than you in that class, like ask them, talk to them.
And that's what I was saying. I tell them all the time. I'm like, dude, okay, there's a student of mine. I'm not going to tell you any names because people, get butthurt. But he's great making weapons and shit, right? And there's this one guy who got super jealous, and I know him. And he's like, you shouldn't be worrying about 3D and doing concept art. There's no money in this industry, and it's just bumming him out for no reason. And I'm like, but why? I don't get it. And to me, and you work out as well, right? And I was telling
Yeah.
my students about this yesterday on my live stream. We had 280 people on the live stream on my YouTube channel yesterday.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a big plus for me. I mean, so, but we work out, right? Show your guns, please. Please do that. Please do double bicep. Please,
I'm
man.
not showing you.
Okay, but you
We'll
do
do it
work.
later.
Yeah, okay, we'll do it later. But you do work out. So, and
Yeah,
I think
work out.
there's something to say about that because we are dealing with failure every day, and it's a psychological thing, right? You have to get accustomed to the way of like, I will fail and it's okay, it's part of the process. Next week I'm gonna come stronger. And I think feedback is a lot of that, right? So you do stuff and it looks good. Even if you don't show anybody, sometimes you just take a break from it and you come back and you're like, actually it sucks. And you cannot be like, I'm gonna keep it, because I spent 2 hours on it. You have to change it since you see it, right? And I think there's a lot of...
That failing is growing.
Yes.
I think you hit it right. Like the whole point of weight training is you tear your muscles down so they can heal back stronger, right?
They don't grow in the workout.
That's the same thing, right? Like you hit it right in the head. If I do something I like, I sleep on it.
Yeah.
And that next morning, if I wake up, I'm always excited. I'm like, I can't wait to look. But that next morning, I'm gonna know if it's good or bad.
Yeah, and it's brutal because you never know. You never know.
Yep, and you never know. But that next morning, you do know because you have a new perspective, and that's why they say sleep on it for many other reasons. It goes back to scientific
pathways.
Science,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
And I think even like to fix up some skills, I always have the best experience if I'm trying to learn something and then I sleep. I don't try to push it too hard and I sleep, and then next day I already know everything. It's so weird because it gets so ingrained on you.
So if you guys are interested in that, Matthew Walker, While You Sleep, talks about all of that. And they basically have found when you learn something that's really, really hard, right? So 2 hours of learning, they took people and they made them take a nap for 15 to 20 minutes. And then they tested them later that afternoon. And the people that took the nap after doing that hard bit of studying scored like 98s, all the way up until hundreds. The people that they let go on the phone for that same break or do whatever they wanted scored like, in the B's. So what they talk about is your brain can only store so much information. So you want to think of it like a hard drive.
Yeah.
So you just got all this information and you got to move it from short-term to long-term memory. So that sleep is what allows you to dump all that information into long-term so you can retain it.
Yeah.
So these are like biohacks that you can do for your when you're doing working. If you're doing tutorials, like do the hard, like, do an hour, take a break, do an hour, take a break, maybe take a nap, and then come back to it, and it's going to retain in your head better.
Yeah, I always tell my students that too. Because but it's good because they need to know that. Sometimes they are asking me, Augusto, it's okay if I work, if I study only 1 hour a day. I'm like, it's great. And some people think it's too little, but in a week it's 7 hours. Who studies 7 hours straight? Nobody, right? And actually, if you do that, are you really studying 7 hours straight? Probably not. You're just scrolling through Instagram or something, just gathering images on Pinterest. You're not doing anything, And we know we have that problem as artistic people and autistic people as well, because we are a little bit autistic, 100%. You just go gather some reference and all of a sudden you spend like 1 hour on Pinterest and you're like, what am I doing here, Just having ideas for other projects all of a sudden, we already actually talked about this, but I was about to ask you about like strong social media presence. You already brushed on that, but if you want to give me a little bit in-depth answer to that, like how do you feel about that? Do you still work through Instagram looking up some new work, or like just keeping in touch with some artists?
I'm a bad person for myself being on Instagram because I was already making connections in the industry before a lot of that blew up. And just to be honest with you, like the way I grew up, like I played a lot of sports, and there's a humility that I have with stuff. So I don't like bringing up my artwork. I don't like showing it just because I feel like I'm like these people, look, bro, look at my stuff. Look at this thing I made. It's awesome. But to be fair, I think it is important as an artist, if you're doing it professionally, you're not being annoying about it. You're not like responding to everyone, getting in fights like people do on the boards. Like, just treat it as something where you're just excited and you're putting it up there. So it is important. That's where the world is now. But more importantly, beyond that is making connections. Because you can be on social media all day, but you need to make physical connections with people, like reaching out, talking to them to build those relationships. Because at the end of the day, if you're only talking to people, on the board, you're just data.
Yeah.
For all you know, they could be talking to a chatbot, right?
Yeah,
So
you never know.
you need to get on these calls like we're doing now and talk to people face to face, build relationships, because those relationships down the road, those are going to be the people that pull you into projects,
Yeah.
right? So if you look at film, all the best directors have the same crew that they move from project to project to project on. They hire them on. So it's no different than, video games now, right? So that's what I would say is have a presence on social media, but take time to get to know like your art director, your boss, your colleagues, because you never know when one of them is going to reach out to you. Like colleagues, this happens all the time. I'll be like, oh, hey, Ken are you busy, dude? Like, I'd love to get your help. Or, hey, this person over there I work with. So that's why it's important. Going back to your earlier question is having a good attitude, right? So when you're working for a team, do the things that people don't want to do, right?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, if you have someone that's always a go-getter, like, hey, boss, I'll try it. Let me do it.
I always
like,
do
hey,
that.
do you need help?
I always
right?
do
Like,
that.
whatever it is, you're the person that's there, you're dependable, and you're helping. Like 9 times out of 10, you're going to be the first person called back. Right?
Yeah. Actually, all my jobs always happen like that. And I always like under promise, I try to over deliver. I never tell my clients, I'm going to give you 10 silhouettes by tomorrow and then I'm going to do photo bashing and 3D. By the end of the week, you're going to have 10 characters. You never do that. Because if you do that, then you're setting up yourself for failure. Because as long as, let's say you do the 10 silhouettes, right? And then you get feedback on it. Now, all your plan is screwed. So you have to do feedback, and then you have to do feedback for the photo bashing, and people don't actually organize themselves that way. There's a lot of artists that I think they think of themselves as stars, to some extent. Like, I'm not gonna tell you any names as well, but maybe I'll tell you later, because you probably know him. Huge guy, okay? He got hired in the same gig with me to do some work for some characters, right? And I'm grinding myself. I'm hiring other guys to help me because I want to, deliver the best I can.
Yeah.
He doesn't show up for 2 weeks, this other guy, right? Yeah. And then by the last week of like 2 months period, he's like, actually now I'm free. So I can do all the work in 1 week. And then everybody's like, what the fuck? Okay. Yeah, maybe he's awesome. Maybe he can do it, right? And then he doesn't do it. He just vanishes.
Oh my.
And I'm like, how can you do? And then I had to do everything that he didn't do in the last week, right? So it's like, I don't get that. Why would you even put yourself in that situation, So that goes back to like, just be a nice guy, just be a cool person. It's so easy. Just don't be like, I don't know the correct expression to use here because I don't want to be offensive. But I think, people just don't overpromise. Maybe that's the best.
Don't overpromise, but I think at the end of the day, man, life is more than art. And I think what people need to understand too is that if you're being a good person, just like Jesus said, and you're really just looking out for other people and helping, it comes back to you, man. Like, you're going to be so well off. People are going to be helping you when it comes down to it. And it's not about having something in return, but it's being selfless, man, and building others up.
Yeah.
And I think when you do that, you're going to find that your projects are awesome because everyone in there starts to see like, hey, Augusto, man, his attitude's so good. I love working with him. Yeah. And then they start being better. And it's like wildfire. Then that whole project, it could be like a project that people were like completely grumpy, but now everyone is seeing like the turn of
Let's do this.
Yeah, it is. And it's a big thing. And I think I know one question that people had for me before, and I even had the issue when I was immature and working in games, like I didn't want to tell people my secrets, right? So but I'm gonna call it out there because I know other people are thinking it. So like when I started, I busted my butt. I went through all of the Unreal like sample files. I learned everything I possibly could, man. Like I was just digging up information. I was interviewing everyone. I wanted to learn how they did it, and I collected my quote secrets, right? And for a while, like I would teach people that were in my group that I was a lead over, but I wouldn't want to go beyond that. And because I had this attitude of scarcity that basically if I told someone else, then I wouldn't be able to get a job or whatever it is. But now that I've matured, I realize I'm like, dude, I will tell anyone my secret because at the end of the day, I know them better than you. Yeah. Because I can come up with more secrets, right? Exactly. So at the end of the day, it's like, and I think that's the thing people need to realize. It's like, everything you do, like someone else has already done it, but if you could help someone else do it, that's going to elevate the whole project. And then, you know, if you're talented enough, you're going to just keep churning these things out. So I think that's one thing that people worry about with being selfless and helping each other, is that they worry that they're going to give away their secrets or be taken advantage of. But at the end of the day, it's always a net positive for yourself.
And for like generalists versus like specialists. In concept art, I think it's a little bit weird because in my mind, if you're an artist, a concept artist, and you only do characters and don't even try to make guns or vehicles, you're already lost, you know? I mean, you can do that sometimes if you're really good, you know,
Really good, yeah.
If you're like Carlos Wante, you can say like, I just want to do characters, you know? But even him, like he does characters, he does creatures, you know? He does some vehicle stuff, which is super weird, you know? But you know, so when you're looking at someone, you already said something about this, but if you're looking at a portfolio and you see like, okay, this guy fits a project, but do you keep that in mind if you're like, oh, maybe this guy has like a couple different styles, and in the next project I'm doing, I'm probably gonna be looking at him, you know? How do you see all that stuff like for generalists versus specialists?
Totally, and I think just cutting to the chase is, if you're gonna be a specialist, you have to be the best in the industry for you to stay employed.
Exactly.
Right. So just at the end of the day, it's about diversifying so you can be picked up. So I do hire specialists, right? There will be a time where, like, you know, I'll hire a guy that's awesome at weapons because I need the person that's good with weapons and his portfolio fits that. But the challenge with that is that he will only be employed for that time I need him for that very specific thing. Versus I can hire someone like you or someone who can do the whole range of it, right? Where then I'm like, cool, he did this thing. Now I can move him on to something else. Now I can move him on to something else. So he's continually employed for the whole project versus going in like a strike team and just hitting that one thing for a month or 2 months. So I think it's always better. But again, you know, master of none and jack of trades, you know, that's what they say, the jack of trades, master of none. But, you know, there's a point where you don't want to spread yourself too thin. But being a concept artist, you know, all of that should fall within that, you know, that umbrella. You should be able to do at least two things.
Yeah, at least.
Don't just do one. Right?
Yeah. And design is design at the end of the day. If you can do like a gun, you probably can do a vehicle. And if you can do a character, you probably can do a creature. So it's like, you know, and a character is nothing more than a bunch of like assets as well. So if you have pouches and everything, you're already like a prop designer at some point, you know? So formal education. Okay, many people ask me about this. Augusto, do I need to have like a graduation? Do I need to be graduated in some kind of design or art school? I don't think so, but maybe I'm wrong here. Maybe you can say something to that.
Yeah, so when I get resumes or something and it's like they tell me about how good they were in their college, I just rip it up and throw it out.
It doesn't matter.
At the end of the day, when it comes to art, unfortunately, like
fortunately,
going to college,
maybe.
Well, fortunately or unfortunately, right? Depending what side you're on. But like, you know, going to a 4-year college is not necessary if you're trying to get into concept art. That's just the reality of it. Now, where it could be helpful is that you're going to get well-rounded and learn things you wouldn't probably be exposed to. But if you're really trying to focus on being a concept artist, there's so many tutorials out there. There's so many different programs you can do where you could do that without having to go to a school. Because again, just so from the hiring perspective, I'm not looking at have you graduated college. I'm looking at your portfolio only. That's it.
And also I think there's a lot of problems with getting into that, you know. And okay, here in Brazil, I don't know how it's in the United States, but I did study in the best school in South Korea in 2013, okay? And they were ahead of the game, okay? They were like light years ahead of the game. Like stuff that I saw back then, I still don't see nowadays into like the college experience in Brazil, right? But, you know, like in Brazil, they teach you Maya 2010 or something, you know? And you're like, the software is not important, but at the same time, it kind of is, you know, because you don't want to. Yeah, it is important. And most of the things that it bothers me with the whole college thing, most of the professors, and I'm not saying everyone, and I know that's not true, but most of them, they are only professors, and there's nothing wrong with that. But the industry changes so much, right? Even the last couple of years, like what's happened with AI and like 3D and stuff is so crazy. Like you're never gonna see that in school, and you already lost it, you know, because you're spending like 15 grand a year or more, you know, just to learn something that is old. Unless it's like super good, like design school, that all the knowledge you're gonna get is like.
Unless you're going to like art center or something like that, where you know the teachers have been. So, again, if you're going to a school like that, it's expensive though. So I would
Yeah.
also just look at that. But at the end of the day, it's called modeling. You find the person that you like in the job that you want to do. You talk to the best person that's done it and you see how they do it. And then what you can do in the matter of a year is you can take 30 years of their life's secrets
It's
and
true.
learn it and then be ahead. So with art and like any kind of trade, that's what's awesome about it. And so
Yeah.
I think that's the mentality you got to have is like, hey, I like Augusto's work. I'm going to
Yeah.
take his class. You guys should take his class if you're not. But
Yeah.
so that way you can learn the secrets because, you know, Maya, dude, no one uses Maya anymore. They use Blender because it's free and it's better, right? And
Yeah.
again, there's all these tricks. And like the other point is that you can use AI software to take your 2D image and put it in game in less than 2 minutes. That's what we're doing. So
Yeah.
there's so many tricks that you're not going to know if you're going to a professor because they are teaching from their perspective and they have a syllabus, but they're not actually active in the industry, right? And there may be some that do both. Like I had some teachers, you know, at Loyola that were actually directors on Simpsons, and they would just help out and do it. And like also storyboard artist Jay Olivia, he's amazing. He did all the Justice League and stuff, but he would just do it on the side because he loved teaching. So when you get a teacher like that,
Then
yes,
it's like,
go to a school.
damn, yeah. It's so funny because I remember the first time I was working professionally with an art director, it was actually Figini. I actually did work before that to Netflix, but it kind of didn't have anybody on top of me. They just were like soliciting some artwork, right? But when I worked with Figini, one of the things you said like about learning 30 years of experience, right? Like I remember doing some silhouettes and he's like, no, Augusto, not like this. Like this. I'm like, what do you mean, dude? He's like, no, just change the waist like this. I'm like, okay, then I did it. I'm like, I would never think about that, you know, how that would change. Because as soon as I did that, like just change the angle of the waist, it changed the whole design. I'm like, damn, there's so much I don't know, you know? And then I'm just like clinging to him and like even Juante, right? He was doing like, even you, when we were doing like the Dawn of Fire, you were like, no, Augusto, you have to worry about like how it matches with the environment. And I'm like, I never thought about that. Like I never crossed my mind, you know? Like I have to actually worry about that because I always do my characters in a vacuum, you know? So it's a lot of things to learn that you cannot learn in school most of the time, unfortunately. Yeah. So there's a little tips and tricks that we learn in the industry, right? And let's talk about money if you don't mind, right? What's like, I don't know, it kind of changes for everyone, everywhere. It depends on the
changes
student.
a lot.
But let's say for like a junior guy, right? It's starting the industry now. Let's say he's just got a new hire, maybe it's a freelance gig. I think I can speak to that, like for the freelance stuff. I think I saw many people do like $250 a day, like $250 a day, like a junior guy, like with a pretty good portfolio. Sometimes they do more, like I saw some people starting at $450. I started at $450, but I don't think I'm like the baseline for like, you know, normalcy in the industry. But what you're looking for, like a medium, like monthly salary instead of like a day rate.
Yeah, so you're saying 250 a day. I mean, again, I'd have to do all the math on all that, but yeah, so it depends on who's hiring, right?
Yeah.
And right now it's for juniors, it's tough because you have Mid-Journey's been a big issue, right? So people are thinking they can get stuff done through Mid-Journey.
Yeah.
But if you're coming into a studio, like when I left the last AAA studio I was at, you know, you're probably getting concept artists in like junior level, like high 50s to low 60s a year. $60,000.
That's pretty good too.
Right?
That's pretty good.
And again, they'll have benefits, so you have benefits along with that. But you know, concept artists, I mean, you guys can make a lot of money, especially freelance. Now, as you guys know, that when you're doing freelance, you still have to pay for your own health insurance. There's a lot of other things you got to take care of. So you will get more money, right? But you do have a lot of other things that you're going to have to do. And I think just words of the wise is you got to save your money. Like,
yes.
Do not get your money and start throwing it around and thinking that you're rich now, because it's, again, you can probably speak to the too, Augusto, but this last year has been really rough for a lot of people in the game industry. There's like thousands and thousands of jobs that, you know, people of like AAA quality have been fired. Concept art hasn't been needed as much with the AI, so all that. So, but again, you're always going to need it. It's just that we are at a downport. So if you have money, you want to have 6 months, you know, minimum saved, and that 6 months should be like everything you need from your rent, the food, so that way you have time to find another job, right?
Yeah, and another thing, people ask me about the AI stuff, and it was the same thing when they introduced like Photoshop. Not the same, but it's similar, right? The industry does this all the time, right? And even in the small time that I've been into the industry, like the last 10 years, did like 3 peaks and valleys, right? So it's just something that I need to get accustomed to. Don't get too emotionally attached to like, maybe I'm gonna be out of a job in a year. But you have to have money. In any situation, in any industry, if you're doing anything, you need to have at least like some money saved up in case something happens, right?
Yeah, one of the best things that a guy told me when I was working at my first job is like, dude, you got to save half of your paycheck, every paycheck, minimum, right? And just have that mentality and budget. Going back to the AI thing, it's funny because when cavemen were pulling stuff around with their muscles and they made the wheel, you had guys complaining, oh, we don't need that wheel.
Yeah, that's a bitch move.
We're gonna get weak.
Yeah.
So it's like, and the same thing happened with radio, same thing happened with TV, same thing happened with phones, right?
Yeah.
And again, the technology is not bad, it's how you use it.
Yeah.
And so I feel like with AI, instead of people freaking out, like you need to learn how to embrace it. You need to learn how it's bad, how it's good, and then use it to speed up your workflow, right? Now, there's creative issues. If you're going in there and like, hey, make me a sparse, blah, blah, blah. Yeah,
Yes.
then at that point, you're not designing and you're copying, but you're still exploring, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's stuff that if you're using it to do your research and exploring, I think that's fine. But,
Yeah.
there's cool things that you guys can do is actually put in your own images, make your own style, and then pump out more like things. This is something that we've been doing a long time in 3D, is that we would do like geometry nodes and basically make random generators. So I can look at different shapes of things that I never would have seen because your brain gets used to staring at the same thing. So you have to break that pattern. So that's why you flip your screen, upside down or to the right or to the left. Like in the 3D, you hit a button and it just create up like 20 different shapes. Right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, that's cool. I didn't think about that. So
I
use the tools to help yourself.
It's funny you say
don't
that
be scared.
because I asked a friend of mine in Indonesia to write me a script for ZBrush. He would do exactly that, just generate random shapes with like primaries, right?
Yeah.
It's just like, I'm like, oh, damn. I never thought about like a box for shoulders, It's just like weird shapes. And I think AI is very similar to that. Like I use AI a lot in my like workflow now, but it's mostly like just to, polish some stuff, or I do a rough photo bashing and it spits out something better. So, because before, people don't know this, but I mean, my students know it, but most people don't know it. But before I had to do like the photo bashing, then you do like the occlusion shadows, and then you have to paint on top, and then you have to do color, and then like, Jesus Christ. Now you can almost skip that, not 100%, but it speeds up the workflow to the point where you can actually spend the time where it's important. It's the creative process, right? Like, how do I get here? Because then you don't have to worry about like doing, 10 hours of polishing stuff up to deliver, It saves your client money and it saves your mind, which is pretty good. So you can have like some fuel for personal stuff, right? Okay, let's wrap this up real quick. Okay. Okay, this is good. I never done art tests. I actually did once, and I was already like super established into the industry, but they were like they were weird. But how do you feel about that? Like, do you prefer like art tests or interviews? Because you probably know already their portfolio at this point if you want to hire them. So what you're looking for? Like, do you want to have a call, just, meet the person?
Yeah. So when it comes to an art test, I've only really used it once or twice, and it's typically for people who don't have enough information in their portfolio, right? And so if you're a senior, it doesn't really happen. You have enough information. If you're a mid, you should have enough information. But your juniors, I think that's where it hits a lot. So in the case, if I saw someone's portfolio, like I saw a lot of like Ringling students that, I don't know if you guys know that school, but they specialize in game design, but they would have a really awesome piece or 1 or 2 pieces, but that was it. So that was on the opposite side of not having enough, but it was good enough for me to be like, well, I see a lot of good stuff here. So I'm gonna at least talk to them. And then I'm going to give them an art test of the style of the game we're working on, right? And so at that point, when you're a junior, like, I think it's awesome. You should take the art test because it's going to be it's a chance for you to try something you haven't done, and then it's going to tell you like your skill set too, right? So I think in that case it's fine, but I think once you're established, to your point, Augusto, it's not necessary.
And okay, so if a person wants to grow into a company, like they get in there like a mid, let's say. Okay, you're pretty good, like you're doing some cool stuff, but you don't want to be doing that for the rest of your life unless you're like super dedicated to that. You know, even me at this point, I just want to be an art director because I have so many ideas in my mind that by myself I cannot do. So how do you grow into a company? Okay, if versus like, let's say an indie studio, or an indie studio, I think it's much easier because you're already gonna have so many tasks that you have to do that are apart from your hiring description, right? If you're a concept artist guy, you're probably doing a bunch of stuff that is like, you know, you're doing like 3D, you're sketching some stuff, you're like giving feedback to like UI, you know, even though it's not your gig. So I think that's already shows some level of like personal growth and maybe getting hired into a higher position. But how is that happens in a AAA? Because I've never been like hired, aside from being a freelance guy. I don't know. Maybe you can tell me about that.
Yeah, growing in a AAA company, right? I think you will be, for the most part, you're going to be growing in that job that you are hired in, right? So that's typically what happens. So if you're a concept artist, you're going to be in that track unless you spend some off time and you wanted to learn game design and you started doing scripting and blueprint, and then you jumped over and all of a sudden you're doing really cool, design, then they might move you into that group, right? But that doesn't happen very often, but it can happen, right? If you're dedicated and you wanted to change tracks once you're in a company, that it can happen, right? But typically, like the path in art is that, your goal would be to get up to like an art lead or an art direction, right? If that's what you want to do, or if not, and you just like making content, then you do that, and then you just level up, and you'll be like a senior level contributor. Then in your pay would reflect that, right?
Yeah.
But it just depends on what you want to do, and a lot of times you guys may not know, right? Because you're just getting in there and you just want to make cool stuff. So I'd say get in there, make cool stuff, see what interests you, right? If you're really getting interested in the storytelling and getting interested in the cutscenes, well, maybe start storyboarding. Maybe start, working with the designers on figuring out how to make the big scenes in the game, because like that's so useful, right? Getting compositions to the designers before they make the maps and the environment guys is just so awesome, because now they can see the art that you have in your brain and it's wrapped around the story. So there's so many things that you can do in the game industry, which is like super rewarding.
And okay, let's change tracks a little bit and just wrap this up. Do you have any piece of advice for someone who's experiencing burnout or something like that, like create like a blackout? And and one thing that I want to say to that, to your last point, most people who get into the industry, sometimes they stop doing personal stuff, I don't see them posting like some cool stuff that they used to. And I think that is a factor to like getting a burnout, where you're just doing like client stuff and you're like, I just want to do some stuff for myself, but I can't, How do you recharge those batteries, JP, as an older man, as a more experienced guy?
Well, that's true, man. It depends on the game you're working on or the project, right? There's going to be projects that are your sensibility. So there's been projects where I don't get burned out. I just love it, right? Like, so I'd be working till 3 a.m. when I was younger, not anymore.
You can't do that.
Anymore, but no, you have those projects and that will fulfill your creative bit. But then there's other games you're on that it's just like, man, I don't want to work on, Puffalumps or whatever it is, and you have to work on it. So I think at that one, you want to still do the best you can. You allocate your time, but you carve out time for you to do your creative work, right? But really for us is like, you have to be on schedule. And I think it's one of the hardest things that I have is that I get in the creative flow and I know I have an hour to do something, but then to your point, I've been on Pinterest for 40 minutes and I'm like, frick, I got to get over. So like, you have to be disciplined to give yourself time boxes. And I think the thing that helped me is like, what's the one thing I can do first that's going to unblock everything else?
Yes.
So when you have that mentality, it's like you're looking at stuff from the big perspective, like, hey, what's the one thing that I can start designing right now that's going to unlock everything? That's going to help you speed up, right? And then at the end of the day, if you're burned out, you just got to take time.
Yeah.
Don't work on the weekend.
Don't be just an artist, right? Have some hobbies, like do some stuff, like go for a walk, pray a little bit or something, Just
100%, because what you're going to see when I go on walks now, I'm like, oh man, that concrete's got some awesome specularity. Look at that. I never thought of that.
Yeah.
But then it's weird, but like you have a new perspective on life. Like to this day, I appreciate God so much more when I walk outside and look
Yeah,
at the beauty.
yeah.
I'm like, how the hell did he make that cloud?
Yeah.
Like, how did he make that sunset? How did he make that tree? It's like, it overwhelms me when you look at how hard it is for us to make something
Yeah.
and you see how beautiful the world is out there. So
Every day. Every day for free.
right?
And it's like some of the students, they start seeing silhouettes now because I'm teaching them that, right? It's the most important fundamental stuff for concept art, silhouettes, right? Silhouette design. And now they're always telling me, oh, now I see everything in silhouettes. Like everything is a silhouette. I'm like, that's it? You got it, right? You look at cloud, they're like, oh, I can see. You don't see just like those random, like weird, like I just see a dragon, you know? Everybody sees a dragon, the clouds do, you know? But you can see like some weird stuff or even the trees. And you can see like, once you understand silhouettes, you can appreciate bugs or animals so much more. Because the fur, the color is all irrelevant if you don't see the shape, you know, the main shape. And I think that I learned from Juante, you know, because he is a weird guy. Like, you know, sometimes I would be in a call with him and he's like, oh, then you can imagine like the tentacles coming from the mouth and like, and he would do this. I'm like, what the fuck are you like, what do you mean? And I would get it because he's like impersonating the creature, right? And even having that child mentality when you're doing stuff is so much better for your mental health. For me, it's like playing with clay. I love to play with clay. I'm not trying to create a cool design. I'm just like trying to be a kid, you know, like just like making weird shapes. And then eventually you're like to your point where you're saying like the concrete. I'm like, oh, okay, maybe I should actually photograph this or scan it, you know, so I can mirror it. So yeah, just have hobbies, dude. Just, you know, maybe take your wife or your girlfriend or your boyfriend to a walk. Just eat something different. Just don't try to think about art most of the time. It's, you know, it is a blessing, but it is a curse to be an artist sometimes because we feel it so much more. You know, sometimes I'm just like, man, I remember a friend and I start crying a little bit. You know, I cry a little bit sometimes. It's okay, you know. But yeah.
And I think the thing to remember is art is never done.
Never.
And I think
done.
that's the hardest thing for myself and a lot of my colleagues is that it could always be better. But at the end of the day, you got to draw a line, right? Because for your own sanity, and it's just, you know, we have to have deadlines. At the end of the day, we're making a product, an experience for someone. So put yourself in their shoes. So we call it the grandma test, right? So if you're noodling on something, then what I do is like I show grandma or I show my son or my wife. I'm like, what do you think? They're like, oh, that's awesome, right? And at
That's
that point,
it.
I'm like, cool, I'm done. I don't need to do anymore, right? But if grandma says, what the hell is that? Then it's like, well, you got some problems. You got to go back to the drawing board.
I think it's so similar to like bodybuilding and stuff because we like bodybuilding. So we see like somebody who is like 15% body fat, you're like, that's fat, you know? But like your wife is like, you're jacked, you like look lean, you know? Because it's like for regular people, like cool design is cool design. That's it, you know? And sometimes we get so nitty-picky, you know, about, but this is not, it wouldn't work because the cable, you know, it's like, but it's cool,
1%.
you know? It is 1%, yes.
For example, like I was having my nephews test our game and we're going through some of the customization and they're like, oh, that's cool. But you know, I kind of like Fortnite. I got this cool black hoodie. And I'm like, what?
Yeah, just a black hoodie?
A black hoodie? He's like, yeah, it was awesome. It's just this black hoodie. And I'm like, dude, get out of here.
You don't know anything.
But that's to your point.
Yeah.
There's a thing, we like to overthink things, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's why it's important to take your work, show your girlfriend, show your wife, show whoever it is to get just a fresh eyes on it in perspective.
Yeah, I actually showed my girlfriend like the last gig I was doing. And like, do you think it actually matches that style? And she's like, yeah, 100%. I'm like, because I don't see it, because I don't see it anymore. I've just been so long. I'm like, okay, that's it. That's done. I'm going to go to the next one now. Yeah, man, we overthink so much about our lives. All right, JP, okay, for the last final question, not a question, but would you like to give a last phrase or last saying or like something that you would like everyone to know, you know, like a general concept that you have in your mind that actually keeps you happy or gives you motivation or gives you a line to follow, you know? Do you have any phrases like that, inspirational stuff? You know, I actually would like to hear.
I mean, I think we talked about it a little bit earlier, and I think the most reward I've ever got in the game industry was not basically making a design. It was not getting the game out, but it was when I could help someone going through something that was tough, right? And I think at the end of the day, it's that human connection. So what I would say, we are so isolated in this world now where everyone's kind of in their own vacuum, they're working from home. but really take time to reach out and connect with people, because that's the thing that you remember. When you're on a gig, like, we remember who we worked with. We remember the funny things that we did. We were not remembering that one silhouette that you spent whatever 2 days on. It just doesn't matter. At the end of the day, it doesn't. Like, there's bigger things. So I think art is amazing, and we're blessed to be in the world to do these really fun things, but don't forget the human connection, right? That's the most important. And I think once you do that, you're going to find that, man, your day is awesome. Like, when you're able to get a good concept down, you help someone else on theirs, you just feel good, right? And I think that's the part that I would say is that I'm excited for all you guys. Like, dude, concept art is amazing. I hope to hire you, so get to work, Augusto, get them going.
Yeah, I
But
mean,
no, it's really awesome. It's just, you guys got to just do that. But again, stay focused and make sure that you're taking your breaks and you're remembering what really matters.
all right, JP, this couldn't have gone better, because actually you matched so many of the points that I already teach my students. It's funny because I never said anything to you about this. You're not hired guy. You're not like someone from Fiverr that I paid $5.
Pay me later, right?
No way. Okay, so guys, thank you so much. Thank you so much, JP. I'm sorry if I made some jokes, because I'm like that sometimes. You know, I like to make jokes.
It's all good. This is awesome.
Yeah, and tell everyone I am actually known into the industry as the Golden Falcon, right?
Golden Falcon. I haven't heard that.
Oh, hey,
Is that why you're?
No,
I don't. I always called you like the mustache and mullet guy, but you have the goatee, so that's.
now I have the goatee. But okay, someone in the industry knows me as the Golden Falcon. Okay.
Golden Falcon.
the
I'll
Golden
have to hear this story later.
Yeah. All right, JP. Thank you so much, and see you next time. Maybe. Maybe we can have a part 2 eventually in the near future or something.
Cool. We can have something more focused. If there's something that your
Yeah.
teammates or your classmates want something more focused, we can do that.
Yeah, if they have questions as well, if you want to drop them in the comment section, that actually helps.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
And that's it. All right. See you. Bye.
All right, y'all.